Good morning and welcome to another episode of Ascension with A Course in Miracles. And today is Wednesday, June the 26th. And in doing some of the uploading of recordings of the last couple of ones that we have done, which I had not uploaded into my YouTube, I realized that I skipped in the numbering. I got off 1 week, a couple of weeks ago. So where I thought today would be recording, let's see, 152. Today is actually going to be, no, let me see. I thought today would be, I started making notes and now I've lost my spot. Okay, today was supposed to be recording 153 maybe, but it's going to be 154. Too funny. So let's get right to it. And, this is one of the beautiful things about this journey is you just don't take things seriously. So I made a mistake. So what? So what? This world is a world where we come to play in the realm of mistakes. If we played in the realm of perfection, what would we expand for? What would we discover? What would we learn? If we already knew all that is, all that is God, and God is all that is, meaning that we and God are one. This is what Jesus came to teach us 2,000 years ago. And Jesus is not the only teacher of that truth. And that's why Jesus is not the only one who was either crucified or burnt at the stake or shot and killed or whatever, because every single being that begins to wake up cannot help but move down the path of realization of oneness, that everything is made of the same one energy. There are not two energies on the planet. There are not two energies in the universe. There is one energy, and that energy expresses in all the different ways that it can express. Like there's only water, one water. There's only one H2O, and it expresses as rivers, as tears. It expresses as lakes and oceans, and it expresses as creeks and puddles, but it's all the same thing. When all of that water is looked at, it's all made of the exact same thing. The ocean is in every drop. Every drop makes up the ocean. Every single one of us is a drop of that ocean of energy that is consciousness, that is God. And the day is coming. It will come because it has to. As we all remember the truth, we all come to the realization, oh, wait a second. We're all equal. We're all made of the same stuff. We're all made of the same substance. And that is when everything changes, because that is when we become the change we want to see in the world. We change our own mind about who we are. That causes us to change how we treat one another. And in the changing how we treat one another, automatically the world is changed. Because when we treat each other like we're separate and we're different and we're divided and we have to take sides and we belong to this group versus that group, and we justify competition that creates haves and have-nots and winners and losers. We justify the game of separation. We justify the continuation of this insanity that pits us against one another. So every single time there is someone who wakes up and who begins to share the truth of our oneness, well, those people have met an untimely death or a very painful experience, even if they didn't meet death by the hands of those who couldn't handle the truth, but they ended up having a very uncomfortable remainder of their life because they were in exile or they were in a jail or they were not able to freely share the truth that they knew, although in their hearts they had come to know the truth that would set many of them free. Many of them began to feel a level of more intense craziness when they began to discover the truth. So this journey moves us through a process that, as you have seen in this particular chart, we all come from the truth of the same one truth. We all come from the same energy, the consciousness of all that is, and we descend lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. We play the game of hide and seek. We hide from the truth. And what hides the truth is the ego. That's all that it is. You've heard me talk about that so much because that is really the only thing we need to learn. We don't need to learn what we are. A cow doesn't need to learn that it's a cow. We just need to look at how we forgot what we are. We need to look at the obstacles that we have created to the awareness of the truth of who we are. If we are already energy, if we are already light, we don't need to learn what that is. That just gets revealed. We begin to feel it. And to be revealed means that it becomes real in us. But what we have to look at is the obstacle. That is why I've created so many charts. I've been teaching. This is what was given to me to teach since 2007. The exact same thing has not changed. And it prepared me to understand the Course, because the Course says the same thing, but the Course in Miracles expands what was given to me through the power of awareness. And through the power of awareness, I came to understand that everything has to be divided into two understandings. Course in Miracles calls it two thought systems. So there's the thought system of the ego, and there's the thought system of God. The thoughts of God are consistent with the reality of energy. Energy is one. And because it is one, it is undivided. And because it is undivided, it expresses in so many unique ways, but all that is made of that same energy is equal. It's like taking Play-Doh. And I've got a little grandson. We were playing with Play-Doh the other day, and we made all kinds of different little characters with these little molds that he has. And we made butterflies, and we made little pigs, and we made all kinds of little things, balls and bats, and you name it, we can make it out of Play-Doh. And everything was individuated aspects of the same Play-Doh. At the end of the day, when we finished playing, we just clumped it all up, and all the stuff became one ball of Play-Doh. And what will happen next time we sit there and play with Play-Doh? We will take it out. We will create little molds. We will use molds and create different shapes. And everything will appear to be separate and different, but it's all the same Play-Doh. So when we understand that God's laws are the same for everybody, and when we are determined to live under no laws but God's, the world becomes a very different place, because then we operate from the truth of who we are. And from the truth of who we are, we cannot help but be loving, be caring, be honest, be helpful and truthful and joyful. Those things are natural. But the ego part of us, is the aspect that allows us to have the human experience. And there's nothing wrong with the ego at the level that we're at. Nothing wrong with the ego. The ego, as a matter of fact, is necessary, because the ego is, sorry for that ding, let me turn this off. The ego is what allows us to experience separation. And we want to have the experience of separation so that we can begin to experience each other in relationship. That is the joy of taking on a physical body. That is the joy of experiencing ourselves as unique, totally different beings, so that the moon can have a relationship with the sun, so that the trees can have a relationship with the soil, so that a man can have a relationship with a woman, or a woman with a woman, a man with a man. It doesn't matter how those relationships come about. They're designed to allow us to experience one another, for God to get to meet all that God is. How else could that energy experience itself in the magnificent, wondrous, infinite ways that it can? How fun that a little boy can take the Play-Doh that he's made of, because in truth, we're all made of the same Play-Doh, but have an experience of playing with a Play-Doh so that he can have the joy of being a little creator. And just as God created the moons and the stars and the little boys and little girls and all those fun things, he gets to be a creator as well because he's made in the image of God. And in the image of God, he gets to take the energy in the Play-Doh and makes all of these different characters, and he gets to play with them. For what reason? Except for the fun of it. But when those little characters remain on the table and then they think that they're individual and they think that they're in competition and they think, oh, he likes me better than that one and he prefers the chicken instead of the ball, then those characters start fighting with each other and start creating a mess. That's what the ego has done. The ego is nothing more than the opportunity for our individuation to be hijacked. And it's been hijacked, and now we're battling each other. And that's all well and good. There's really nothing wrong with battling each other. We have free will. We can do whatever we want to do. But those who are tired of the game, of battling each other, of judgments and fears and insecurities, those who are tired of that game are willing to look at the game and say, okay, there's got to be another way. We want a different outcome. As a child, when I played games, many times, my sisters and I would change the rules. If we didn't like the rules, we would change them. So we would have rules that kind of made more sense. Doesn't mean that is what you should do with every single game, because you start changing the rules of maybe the game of Monopoly or the game of Risk or whatever those games are. Then, it just changes the dynamics of the players for the game, but that's okay. We are creators. We can make up whatever we want to make up because we have been making up whatever we wanted to make up. But the difference now is that those who are waking up are realizing that we want to make up a different game, but we want to make up the game with the rules, the laws that God created, the establishment of the laws that are eternal. We are beginning to accept we want to play by these rules because these rules, and they're not rules per se, they're laws. Those laws apply to everybody, when applied to everybody equally, have a positive outcome. The goal of a world, a planet where we operate with transparency, with integrity, with care and concern and compassion and kindness, the outcome is only good. When we operate by changing God's laws and deciding, you know what, I want to experience lack. God created infinite abundance. The Play-Doh, you can shape it any way you want. There is no lack of abundance there. But the ego says, well, we want to play with lack. We want to play with jealousy. We want to play with anger. We want to play with righteousness. I want to be right and you got to be wrong. The ego decides we are going to do the opposite of what is God's laws. We want to play with the opposite. And that is okay for those who are operating at that lower level of consciousness. And it is a lower level of consciousness because when you understand energy that is contracted becomes destructive. That's what the atom bomb is. It's an energy gets compressed and condensed. And when you are using it with malevolence, with selfishness, with greed, then it is going to be destructive. It has to be, because it is not supporting the expansion of all that is. It is only supporting the benefit for a few at the cost of the many. And that level of consciousness is what I keep referring to as third grade, because I can equate it with the 3D world, the world of separation, the world of haves and have-nots, the worlds of good and bad. We are now moving to the opportunity of ascending to another grade. It's time to leave third grade and move on to fourth grade. Fourth grade, I equate that with the fourth density of consciousness. It's a consciousness that you open your mind up to the truth of who you are. The teachings of so many who have gone before us, including Jesus and Dr. David Hawkins, give us a chart so that we can begin to see. Just like we have grades in school, And we go from kindergarten, first, second, third grade, all, middle school, high school, college. We go from low frequency, being at the frequency of shame. That's when we're the most contracted. That's when we're tight and tense in a little ball, feeling so bad about who we are, because shame is what the ego teaches us is natural. You should be ashamed of yourself. You should feel bad for what you did. You should feel terrible for what you caused. We are taught that. And we are, those of us who are going, wait a second, that's not God's laws. Because if God creates us one and God created everything equal, who should be ashamed of anything? There's no such thing in oneness, because oneness is acceptance. Acceptance is love, unconditional. So as we begin to evaluate where are we, Dr. David Hawkins, through the use of kinesiology, muscle testing, was able to find commonalities. And people who vibrated in shame, tight and tense, were the lowest possible level. Let's say kindergarten. So what happens is that we have to go through grades in school. We have to ascend. We have to learn that we were programmed with ideas like you should be ashamed of yourself. Who do you think you are? And we have to begin to recognize, well, that was my mom's belief about me or my grandfather's belief about me, but is that who I want to believe myself to be? And that's what we've been studying in the recent Course in Miracles in chapter 30, the new beginning. We are in the text, in the Course in Miracles text, chapter 30, the new beginning. We are in section number 7. Section number 7 is the new interpretation. And over the last couple of weeks, we have been studying, the first paragraph says, what or would God have left the meaning of the world to your interpretation? If he had, it has no meaning. If God left the meaning of the world up to us, and we, in our lack of awareness, in our immaturity, if the third graders, run the show, or the inmates run the asylum, we're going to have insanity. And that's exactly what has happened. We have greed, we have wars, we cancel one another, we censor people, we control them and suppress them. We experience jealousy and death and lies and judgment and lack and sickness and suffering and darkness and fear. That's the world the ego made. And you can see it on the nightly news, because it's all about all the stuff the ego has done. Rarely do we hear what God has created. Rarely do you hear about God, because the media has censored God. And if you hear about God, who do they bring up? They bring up leaders of institutions, religious institutions, that oftentimes, not all of them, because many are speaking from a place of truth. We are beginning to see just the incredible clear-minded understanding that we need to hear voices that are speaking the truth, and they're showing up. We have people like Michael Beckwith. We've had people like Gandhi. We have had so many on this planet, too many to mention, who have had platforms where they come and speak truth. And that's important. It's sprinkled about, but the mainstream that we have been conditioned to believe is the source of authority, the source of truth, they censor anything that is unlike what they have to say, which is agendas and propaganda. And that's part of what we have to recognize, is we have to sort and sift through what is the ego's made up stuff and what is the laws of God that are eternal. So in paragraph number 1, God says, if God had left the meaning of the world to us, it would have no meaning. This is meaningless. This is nonsense. This creates destruction. And eventually the war, and because of greed, selfishness, that's what the ego is all about. We would end up in war after war after war until there was only one left. And that one that would be left, because out of greed, there could only be one winner. It might look like the 1% at first, but little by little, as you get rid of more of the 99% and you got the 1% left, do you think they're going to want to share when greed is the base of their belief system, their understanding of who they are? No, they will war each other. They will knock each other out. The mafia was like that. Mafia leaders would knock each other out. They weren't knocking out the people that weren't competing with them. They were knocking out the ones who competed with them. So in a world of competition, it's always for one winner. So the ego eventually will destroy everything that it possibly can until there's one left. And then when there's one left, in that oneness of realization, wow, I'm all, there's no more game. I killed off all the players. Then there is the certain opportunity to discover, okay, what am I? This is pretty lonely over here. And of course, that one just returns back to the allness that is. But we don't need to get to that place unless we want to. And right now, there's an opportunity, like all of us in school had the opportunity to learn, to do what needed to be done, to learn the lessons, and then take the exam, pass a test, and graduate onto the next level. Humanity is at a point of making a decision. Do you want to learn the lessons? Do you want to learn from this and say, I don't want this, I want more of this, and you're willing to graduate to a new level of consciousness? That means you have to take responsibility for the power of your mind, because your mind is what creates the perceptions that then create the reality. If you perceive that war is okay and you fund the government through your taxes that allows for war and you vote for candidates that allow for war, then you want that game. Those are the choices that you're making, and you're funding that reality. And people don't want to necessarily accept that, but that is part of what waking up is you take 100% responsibility, 100% responsibility for everything that you think, because everything you think, everything you support, you bring about as your reality. So in paragraph number, continuing paragraph number 1, we read that the Holy Spirit, when we begin that process of connecting with that source within us, we begin a relationship with that energy. We begin to want to understand, well, what does love, what does light, what does well-being, health, abundance, acceptance, honesty, eternal life, what does sharing look like? What does freedom and expansion feel like? What is it like to create, to experience peace, to have grace? What does that mean? Well, that means that you are willing to acknowledge that within you is something benevolent that can make all decisions, all choices. Yes, including picking candidates that are closer to love and maybe not as much fear, that are closer to grace and not as much greed, that are closer to peace and not as much war. And today, is there anybody that is 100% abiding by God's laws? No, because we're in a world that is ascending. A world that is ascending is made up of people who are operating at 90, 80, 70% ego. And if there's ego involved, there's greed involved. It's going to be there because it's all about me. It's all about my stuff. And if you're locking your doors, then you are operating in the realm of, I got to protect myself, meaning you feel that there is something outside of you that could hurt you. And that's okay. I lock my doors too, because I understand, okay, I live in a world that happens. I'm not going to go break into somebody's house. I don't need to take from anybody else because I operate from abundance, but there are other people who do that. So I acknowledge that in, 7, 8 billion people, well, then let me just go ahead and lock the door and be done with that. That is part of my practice, and I'm okay with that. But if you do it out of fear, that somebody's going to take something from you, and then you're going to be in lack. See, if somebody breaks into my house, whether the door is locked or not, they can get in if they want to. And if they take everything, there is no lack for me. I will not have lost anything because that's not my consciousness anymore. But if you are locking the door because you're afraid your stuff is going to be taken, then you're operating in lack. You're operating in the lower levels of consciousness. You're using the power of your mind to create the perception that feeds that the ego is in charge. And then that continues to be your reality. So we are told that the Holy Spirit looks upon this world with one purpose, and it is that it is changelessly established. The Holy Spirit is the part in us that only looks at things through the lens of God, through the laws of God. It's the part in us that is waking up and having us activate conscious awareness. It's making us clear that we can make a choice between good and evil, between light and darkness, between love and fear. When you internally take responsibility for your thoughts, you are taking responsibility for thinking with God or blocking God with ego. When that becomes clear to you that you are the creator of your reality, you are the creators of your reality, you then recognize, well, thinking with the ego always feels tight and tense and uncomfortable. I always feel worse when I let the ego run the show. When you take 100% responsibility for what you want to feel, then you will think the thoughts that have you feel better. And you shift your reality from third grade because you graduate into fourth grade. And then you do more with God and less with ego. And then you shift your reality from fourth grade into fifth grade, fifth dimension, sixth dimension, whatever you want to call it. So the second paragraph was telling us that what do your scripts reflect except your plans for what the day should be? The script is written. The thoughts that you think write your script. And here's a beautiful thing. It appears that the script is written and we have no chance to change it. And some things, yes, they're written. We chose already our parents before we incarnated. We wrote a script. This is the mom that I want, the dad that I want. I'm going to live in this area. I'm going to have this. This is going to be my economic status. This is going to be my religious status. My parents are either going to operate down in a tough place. I may be born to a family that is in shame or in guilt or in fear, or operating in a place of total grief or apathy. And we are born high frequency beings, and then we are little by little conditioned, trained, and pulled down to their frequency. But we don't go down to their frequency because we come to forget our frequency totally, completely, and just shift and change from 100% love to, let's say, 10% love. Without love staying there, there's going to be that 10% love, which means that there's always something inside of you pulsing, calling you back to the truth of who you are. That is the desire to want to know, who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? That gnawing inside that wants to live a life of joy, that gnawing inside always remains there. So what is the work that we do? We remove the obstacles to living from our full 100% light, love and light that we are. So what blocks you from remembering that you're light are the beliefs that become the scripts. That I'm not good enough is a script. So a world that is where you operate in, I'm not good enough, then you're going to not get the job that you want. You're going to be in lack, not going to make the money. You're not going to get the partner. You're going to be in fear and jealousy that somebody got the one that you wanted and not you. You're going to operate in wanting to control others. So this is why we have to understand the power of the Course in Miracles is in that it is training us to understand the way the mind works. The mind operates with thoughts. Our thoughts are creative. Our thoughts, our words are creative, especially when we add action to it. So we're told right there in paragraph number 2, what do your scripts reflect except your plans for what the day should be? And thus, we judge everything as a disaster or as a success. We recognize it as, did we advance in our career, or are we retreating or stagnant? Did we get fired? Was that a loss, or did we get promoted? Was that a gain? Everything is seen according to what the world deems based on the ego's ideas of haves and have nots, greed, lack. abundance, according to the ego. So we have to understand that we have had a goal that we were not aware of. The goal that we have been conditioned to is a goal that life is short and then you die. And then, who has the most toys wins. So we have been conditioned into this goal of accumulating, which perpetuates the script of lack, perpetuates the idea that there's not enough, the idea that I'm not enough, because those go hand in hand. Self-worth, net worth go hand in hand when the ego's in charge. So as we begin to decide, I have another goal. My goal is to live as love and light. My goal is to be awake. My goal is to be happy. My goal is abundance and oneness and sharing and caring. My goal is community. I want to live with those who are like-minded to participate in the co-creation of a happy dream, as the Course in Miracles calls it. When people are operating from a place of courage to value themselves and others as God created us, we move to a higher frequency where then the next natural step is neutrality. What neutrality means is we stop judging, we stop controlling, we stop blaming, all the things that the ego loves to do. And when we stop doing that out there, we begin to take responsibility for what we feel in here. And when you decide peace is more important than money, when you decide that your own inner joy is more important than being right, that your ability to have connected relationships is more important than who wins or loses, when you shift what you value to what is experienced within, then the outside becomes irrelevant. Then the outside is not important, because you realize that the outside is a projection. To recognize the outside as a projection, you've got to be pretty advanced on your journey. And most spiritual people, I hate to burst your bubbles, but I know it that this is true because I've been there, done that. It's been my experience, is that we get all spiritualized. But it's the ego that gets spiritualized. And then the ego in its own spiritual awareness still operates from fear and darkness and lack and suffering and all those things. That's why spiritual people get sick. Spiritual people experience loss, lack. Their world falls apart. I know when I was spiritual, my world was falling apart. That's when all of my resources, when all my relationship with my husband, when everything that I thought I had built and I was somebody, my ego was somebody, began to fall apart, because I needed to see that I am what I am. Besides, it has nothing to do with what's outside of me. So what's outside of us has to collapse for us to come back in and value what is within. Like a little child. A little child doesn't walk around thinking about its net worth or worrying about paying the bills. It just is playing with Play-Doh. So we've got to get clear that we have a voice within us that will allow us to remember the truth of the one purpose that God has given the world, the one purpose God has given us, and that is to be creators, infinitely creating. So, but when we create with God's laws, we create with love. So how do you change that? How do you have a world that everything is created with love? Well, you've got to look at the script. You've got to look at the thoughts that you have that are causing the reality that you're experiencing. If you're judging your children and then you wonder why they don't call you or why they are mean to you or why they're not, well, it's because you're judging your children. In your mind, you have created a script of separation. In your mind, you're judging them. You're telling yourself lies that they don't love you or that they're not good enough or that they're not nice enough, because you're operating in needing to control them. You're not getting them to do what you want them to do. So you cancel them, you censor them, you censor your ability to love them, you censor your ability to acknowledge them. So when you're around them, you're uptight. I'm preaching to the choir, I know. However, I only know this because I experienced it. I would be around my family thinking I'm a spiritual teacher. And then I would pay attention to my thoughts. Oh my gosh, I'm judging my sister. I'm judging my child. I'm saying they shouldn't have said that. They shouldn't have worn that. They shouldn't have done this. They shouldn't have chosen to go with this one and not invite me. As I began to pay attention to the script that was running in my life, then I began to go, no wonder they may not want to be around me as much. They may not want to come around or invite me or whatever it might be, because they can feel that I have built a distance from them. They don't feel welcomed in my field, so they don't welcome me into theirs. And they certainly don't go out of their way to come and do things with me if this is the vibe that I'm putting off. So when you move into the realm of courage to go neutral, you sit in observance, you become self-aware, you pay attention to every thought, and then you practice radical honesty. You don't lie to yourself and call yourself spiritual and or awake or enlightened and one with God, and then at the same time still judge the outside as having power over you or having the ability to hurt you or make you feel bad. Because if you give anything external power, you're not utilizing your inner power. God is the inner power. Ego is that outer power. That something outside of me can make me feel good or bad. Something outside of me can complete me. We have to observe that voice that is saying that. And where's that voice? In our head. That's why we have to be vigilant for what we are thinking. Because if what we're thinking gives rise to the world that the ego has created, we need to remove power from those thoughts. And how do you remove power from those thoughts? You got to think a higher vibing thought. You've got to begin to learn the truth about God. We got to move out of these immature teachings of religion telling us that God is on a cloud. I mean, that's pretty childish. By now, people who've been on a spiritual journey have gotten to the place that they realize that that's very childish, that God is like Santa Claus deciding if you're naughty or nice, or like the Easter bunny that's going to bring you, a present, an egg, a golden egg if you behave. We've got to grow up. We got to move out of third grade. So how do we do that? We begin to take control of our mind and we begin to understand the truth that is true always. So when we move on to the next paragraph, it tells us that only a constant purpose can endow events with stable meaning, but it must accord one meaning to them all. The ego is what allows us to have conflict, doubt, worry, fear. One day we have peace, one day we don't have peace. That's all because the ego runs the show. So if you want to have constant purpose, you want life to be peaceful, then you must be of one accord. That means that you must have one meaning for everything. And there's a lesson in the Course in Miracles that says, I'm under no laws but God's. And when I began to read exactly what was in there, I began to recognize that I had to take all power away from the outer world. I had to stop relying on externals for my safety, for my security, for my abundance, for my joy. I had to come inside. And when I did, I began to cultivate a relationship with God. And then it became clear, this is the only meaning I want. I want the meaning of jealousy. I don't want how to feel greed again. Those things don't feel good. They don't feel good because I was aware that the thoughts of the ego contracted me. I was in unease. That doesn't feel good. When I would think, it's an abundant world, my needs are being taken care of, and I would sit in humbleness, God, what would you have me do? I began to feel expanded. I began to feel open to infinite possibilities. I began to release people from making me happy. I began to release anything from adding on to me because I began to feel the value, the worth that I am because God is in me. And as I began to feel the power that the creator of all that is in me, let me use that power to create with ease, with fun, with joy. And then I began to rewrite my script. This is why the power of affirmations is so wonderful. But affirmations don't work if you're affirming, I want something better, but I never get it. I want something better, but it's a rough world. I want something better, but there's not enough. You have confusion and you're sending mixed signals. Yeah, one day might be good, next may be bad. You may get the promotion, then you're going to get fired. You may get the lover, and then they're going to abandon you. So it's a mixed bag. If you decide that you want only a constant purpose, then you must accord it one meaning. And that means you realize that the world is here, like the Play-Doh, for us to play and create infinite possibilities. And as more of us align to that way of thinking, we are then co-creating a new earth. We are coming together in what the Course says, co-creators of a happy dream. We begin to think, how can I be in service to the world that I want? You realize that you must be the change you want to experience. So it goes on to say, sentence number 3, if they are given different meanings, it must be that they reflect but different purposes. If you're saying the ego has power for war, and you're voting for that kind of governance that gives you warring, or you operate in greed and you believe, oh, you worship the ones who have so much money, and you disdain the homeless person, then you can't be in equality. So if you give it a different purpose, you're going to be waffling. You're going to be going back between two worlds. And guess what? When you're swinging between ego and God, you cannot leave third grade. You haven't learned the lesson. You haven't learned the lesson that you're the creator of your reality. And if you're creating things that make you feel bad, you've got to take responsibility for how you made yourself feel. Nobody did it to you. Nobody did it to you. This is a hard concept to get in a world where we've been trained that it's always everybody else's fault. So we must understand that if we want one meaning, you got to stop giving it two. Sentence number 4 says, and this is all the meaning that they have, the one meaning. Can this, or I'm sorry, when we operate with with different purposes, can this be meaning? The world cannot find its meaning if we vacillate between two possibilities being equally as real. Can confusion be what meaning means? No. Confusion leads to depression. Depression leads to feeling shame. Where is shame? At the bottom of the pile, down here, guilt and shame. Perception cannot be in constant flux and make allowance for stability of meaning anywhere. A simple example of this, when one of my sons was going through his drug adventure and doing the things that he was experiencing, feeling so bad that he had to take drugs to make himself feel better, we would have conversations and I would ask him, I would take out a flip chart, and I'm sure my kids, I know they did, they hated that. Oh, there comes the flip chart. And I would get my flip chart out and I would put a mark on the board and I would say, okay, you're here. What do you want? Well, I want to do well in school. I want to have happy relationships. I want to, okay, so those are high-vibing. What are you doing? Well, I didn't turn my homework in, or I didn't even do my homework. Okay, you went down. You did it and didn't turn it in. Well, okay. You're being mean to your friends or you're lying. Okay, you're going down. You say you want to be up here, but your thoughts and your actions are down here. And I would show them. I said, you can't get up there if you constantly support down here. If you are making decisions out of anger, out of fear, you are creating the script that this is your reality, a world that you should fear. If you want to have success, if you want to graduate, if you want to have a joyful career, if you want to have happy relationships, you cannot continue to think that the world is out to get you, that you're a screw up, that you are just totally, well, in his words, I'm a fuck up. You can't experience the joy of co-creation if what you keep telling yourself, your script, is that you're a fuck up. Those are two very different frequencies. So you have to make a decision. Perception cannot be in constant flux. You cannot continue to say that you want peace for the world and then support that which causes war to be the norm. So you have to question every single one of your decisions. And that means taking responsibility for the power of your thoughts because they're creating the world that we're experiencing. Sentence number 8 says, fear is a judgment never justified. We read that we studied that in one of our previous sessions. Fear is a judgment never justified. Anger is never justified. That was paragraph number 1 in the previous section, which was the justification for forgiveness, section number 6. Now we're in section number 7 in paragraph number 3, and it's reminding us fear is never justified. Its presence has no meaning but to show you wrote a fearful script and are afraid accordingly. When we look at the script that we have written, when we continue to believe that we're not good enough, that the world's out to get us, that life is so difficult, that I'm unlovable, when that's what you're believing, and it makes sense that you believe that. Why? Because you came in a bright light and you descended into the belief system of your parents, your family, your community. You went down and accepted their opinions about you and life as true. They weren't true necessarily, but you accepted them as true because after all, you idolized your mom and dad. Those are the first people that begin to have you think that external authorities have power over you. So if they think you're a screw up, then by gosh, you must be one. Can you imagine how conflicted the mind of a child is that knows internally it is love and light, but then it thinks it's unwanted? That's a lot of confusion. That's why, teenagers are so depressed, is because they know the truth, but it gets pressed down to the point that they can barely feel it because they're operating in acceptance of the lies that they have been told by the people who are raising them, who have long forgotten the truth of who they are. So we've been pulling humanity down. Now we're in a process of ascension. Now parents are waking up and moving to a higher frequency. So we're pulling our children not so far down. And eventually our children's children, our grandchildren, my grandchildren for sure, are going to be operating at a much higher vibe. And when they have their children, they're going to stay in this realm of realizing that they are the Play-Doh, and they're each a different character in that Play-Doh. They're experiencing separation, but it's okay because they're in co-creation from love. They're co-creating a happy dream. Here, we've all been participating in a nightmare because we didn't know how powerful we are. So it goes on to say that, and I'm going to repeat this. So fear is a judgment never justified. Its presence has no meaning, but to show you wrote a fearful script and are afraid accordingly, but not because the thing you fear has fearful meaning in itself. The government, it has no power in and of itself. We give it to it. If we all decided, nope, government has no power, it would have no power. If we withdrew our attention, our money, our permission, our compliance, it has no meaning except for the one we give it. We wrote a script that said the 1% get to have the 99% of resources. We wrote that script. If you don't like that script, then you must withdraw your participation in it. We are going through a transformation, and it's not going to be easy. The government doesn't want to lose all of its power. The media, all of these institutions don't want to lose all of its power. But if we are not believing that they have it, then they won't have it. So there's a natural, a normal process, which is the ego's way of doing things. They are going to do what they do best. Out of greed, they're going to go to war with us. And that's okay if we can accept it. Gandhi accepted it. Jesus accepted it. And they both have shown that, yeah, they might have taken their lives, but they didn't win. The governments did not win. The truth prevailed. We listen to that truth. We abide by that truth. We have had other people use that truth. Gandhi used what he learned from Jesus, from Buddha. Martin Luther King Jr. used what he learned from Gandhi. So every generation is passing down the information that is helping in the ascension of consciousness. Every generation that decides, we're not going to do it this way, we're going to operate the way of love, moves us on the ascension path one step further up. Third grade, fourth grade, which one you want to be in? You have to decide. You have to write the script. You have to decide what is it that you believe. And when you decide what you believe, well, that's going to become your reality. I'm going to go on to paragraph 4. A common purpose is the only means whereby perception can be stabilized, and one interpretation given to the world and all experiences here. What that means is we must have one goal. Either we're going to go in this direction, or we're going to continue to go down or go up and down. And anybody who's going up and down doesn't go very far up. You can't with this much weight pulling you down, because you're tethered to this as your reality. So we've got to come up with one purpose. If all of humanity, instead of fighting, this is my political party, this is my belief in the medical, my opinions about these things that you put into your arm, I don't want to say those things because I don't want to get censored, because we operate in the world that censors those who share things that are not according to what the ego believes. And when we begin to move to the realm of what God believes, the laws of God's, then I'm playing the game. I won't say the thing. So, I have my opinions about those things, but anybody who sees it differently may be mad at me, may want to argue or disagree. But if instead we had one common goal, do you want well-being? Do you want health? Yes, we all could agree on that. So let's have the common goal. How do we get to health? How do we get to the acceptance of the well-being that God has already put into our bodies? Then let's move in the direction of researching, how do we activate that goodness? How do we activate that well-being? And there's plenty of evidence of all the natural ways that is accomplished. So why would we fight one another? Why would we censor somebody with a different opinion? Why? Because of greed. Because of greed, we keep people at war with each other. And when we don't like what somebody says that doesn't allow for us to experience the benefits of the greed that we have, then we must censor them. Why do we censor them? Because we have to control things. Why do we control things? Because we have become jealous people. We covet what others have. We are not okay with what we have. So we've got to take it from them. And that comes from a world that believes in death, that death is the end. So I got to get mine before I die. He who has the most toys wins. And that comes from lies that we have learned. And those lies were taught to us by people who operated in lack, and through their judgments, judging themselves not enough because they didn't have, allowed themselves to be filled with lies that caused them to then become trained in ways of doing things that benefited only the 1%. So you got to look at things with reality, or with clarity, so you can begin to understand that keeping people in a place of sickness, in a place of suffering, is what the darkness is all about, that is being exposed because we're no longer willing to live from fear. So what's the opposite? You got to understand the things of God, the laws of God. So we have to have one common purpose. Can we start having conversations based on what we want? I recently posted something in a group, the restaurant job that I have. We have a little group chat, and I posted something that my share was, here's something that is being proposed for the next election as a part of the campaign of one candidate, and that would be very beneficial to the restaurant industry. And it was met with some people going, we don't want political information conversation in our safe little chat group. Instead, they post things about people pieing each other for their birthdays, or playing prank games on them, or just talking about, somebody forgot to clean up a ketchup bottle or whatever. Those things are important in that group, but something that could be beneficial for everybody in the industry is not okay because it's with one candidate versus another. And if they don't like this candidate, well, then they don't want to hear it. But do you want something that's beneficial for the industry, that benefits you ultimately? So those are the kinds of things that the ego, in its need to be right, cancels others, censors them, because it can't hear, it doesn't want you to hear the common truth, because the common truth is always logical. But the staying on the other side is illogical, but it feels like power. So we have to override. We got to train our minds to listen to that and go, wait a second. Instead of let's censor what she is saying, let's ask, why are you saying that? Be open-minded, which is a characteristic of somebody who has trained their mind to understand God's laws. So in this shared purpose is one judgment shared by everyone in everything you see. You do not have to judge for you to have learned one meaning has been given everything, and you are glad to see it everywhere. You don't have to judge people who want to be open-minded. You don't have to judge people who just want to be heard because they feel that there's value in different opinions. You don't have to judge people who have a different opinion if you want to be heard for your opinion. Judgment is not needed in the realm of God. Judgment is only needed here in the realm of the ego. But to get to no judgment, you've got to get to neutrality. Before you get to neutrality, you have to have courage to move past your pride and stop thinking that only you are right. So that thing that I shared in that little group, that would be, if that candidate wins and passes that, it'd be a wonderful thing. But that same thing can be passed by any candidate. And that's the beautiful thing, is that if we joined in one common purpose for something that would be beneficial to the industry, then instead of pushing against the one candidate we don't like, what if we ask the candidate that we do like to make that also part of their platform? And this is where we don't come into consensus, because we don't stop thinking what is in service to the greater good of all. We look at our emotional reactions as the determiner of what side we're on, low vibrations of the ego, or we move into the higher frequency of acceptance that takes us into neutrality, but we have to have courage to move past our righteousness, past our pride. So it cannot change because you would perceive it everywhere. The meaning wouldn't change. The meaning of greater good, doing things for the greater good, we would see it everywhere. It is unchanged by circumstance. And so you offer it to all events and let them offer you stability. When we decide that we are going to do things for the greater good, that we are going to operate in making sure that everybody wins, that we don't have winners and losers, but rather we all operate as winners because God already established us as winners. When we operate from a place of taking our rightful place in creation, then we realize that we're all just Play-Doh. Not one of us is better than the other. Just because you're red Play-Doh and I'm blue Play-Doh does not mean that anyone is better than the other. They are different for a reason, so that we can distinguish one another, so that we can have experiences as separation, so that we can be in the world. Through the Course in Miracles, we're training our mind not to be of it, meaning not to be of the world the ego has made. Instead, operate from a place that we know that we're in the world, but not of it. We are God's emissaries of love and light, here to illuminate this world, to take it to a higher frequency where we can experience heaven on earth, where we can graduate from 3rd grade and move to a more elegant 4th grade, 5th grade eventually, 6th grade eventually. There are dimensions that are not even available for us to even think about, because first we have to master the one that we're in. So you write the script of your reality. Which reality are you going to script your life in? Are you going to continue to experience difficulties? Well, then I'm going to tell you. If you want to practice a really wonderful way to hold yourself accountable, when you feel bad, say, oh, I created that. I chose the thoughts. I chose to believe whatever I believed that caused the experience of that discomfort. When you do something, experience something wonderful, you say, I created that. I chose to believe the thoughts that gave me that experience. So I fluctuate between tension and tightness, low frequency, and expansion and high frequency based on the thoughts that I think. Do I want my future world, my future life? Because we're scripting for the future. You script today to think the thoughts that bring into manifestation your tomorrows. That's just the way it is. Do you want to really be the creator of your reality consciously? Then you must decide to be under no laws but God's. Otherwise, you need to be very honest with yourself and say, I'm being lazy. I'm letting my ego choose my thoughts. And I don't like some of my realities. And I sometimes complain about them. But you know what? I must be enjoying the discomfort that comes with complaining and feeling like a victim. When you begin to tell yourself, I chose that experience, it won't be long before you will stop choosing what makes you feel bad. Because when you become honest with yourself and you recognize that every discomfort is self-made, you will stop making those for yourself. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being part of today's conversation. And again, this is episode 154. Now that I've got our numbers straight, I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday, 12 o'clock Eastern time, in these transmissions that are just such a joy to share. I love you all. Take care. Bye-bye.